Welcome to Evolving Humans. I'm your host, Julia Marie. If you've ever sensed there's more to you and to reality than what you've been taught, this show is for you. We explore consciousness in a grounded, practical way, how human awareness is changing, what ideas like Christ consciousness or past lives really point to, and how all of that connects to the choices you make every day. No dogma, no jargon, just honest, down-to-earth conversations to help you live from a deeper knowing as we walk this path of awareness together. As we embark on this exploration, I want to start at the beginning, the place where every good journey begins. This episode lays down the framework for our exploration of human consciousness. And today, we look at the individual awakening within the larger context of the evolution of human consciousness as a collective. If it seems to you that more and more people are experiencing individual awakening, your perception is correct. This phenomenon is, in my view, a signal that the expansion of our collective consciousness is entering its next phase. Humanity is coming of age. When we go through a spiritual awakening, it can often feel very personal. Most often, this feeling is magnified because we're the only person in our immediate environment having the experience. We're left with no one to talk to about it. And often, we don't want to tell anyone for fear of being judged or ostracized from our tribe. You might find yourself asking questions like, why does my life feel like it's falling apart? Why am I suddenly so sensitive? You may even feel like something is wrong with you and wonder why your old beliefs don't seem to fit anymore. But what if your awakening was part of a much larger story? A story that's been unfolding in humanity for thousands, even tens of thousands of years. Today, we take a look at the story of humanity's journey from slumber and survival to our collective spiritual awakening. The story speaks to how human consciousness has changed over time, why understanding the story can be helpful as you navigate your world, and where you might see yourself and your life inside this larger arc of history. Consider your individual life as a condensed version of this larger story, and as we move through each era, ask yourself, where in my life am I living this pattern of consciousness? In other words, where am I living in survival mode? Or where do I live from my heart center? We're integrating all of these developmental stages now, at this time on our planet, and we get to choose how we'll do our human experience. Are we going to remain competitive and self-oriented? Or are we going to help each other to succeed? You know, awareness is a powerful thing. We can change anything once we can acknowledge it. And if we then decide it's not working for us anymore, we make a different choice. Think of this episode as providing you with a map, maybe a set of signposts, to help guide you on your way. You might be asking yourself why you'd even want or need a map of consciousness. Well, here are 3 reasons why. Keep in mind, a map isn't the territory itself. It's a simplified picture of something more complex. We don't want to make the map the absolute truth. We want to use it as a general guide to help us stay our course. A map can be incredibly helpful when we're walking through unfamiliar territory. And a good map? Well, a good map can do these 3 things. It can normalize what you're going through, Instead of you telling yourself, I must be crazy, you'll be able to see that what's happening to you is just a part of the journey. A map can reduce the fear or shame we might feel as we navigate our individual awakening process. And it can also help you recognize not only where you are in your own process, but also the larger patterns playing out in the world around you. So, with that intent and a spirit of curiosity, let's explore one simple way of framing the evolution of human consciousness. When an awakening happens, we often find ourselves restless with no apparent cause, and our lives change in many ways, including our decreasing interest in acquiring more things. We start exploring the non-physical side of life, and thus our journey into expanding awareness begins. We understand that there is so much more to life than can be perceived through our physical senses, and we want to learn about how to navigate that new world. The story of humanity's awakening is an uncomplicated way to understand the evolution of human consciousness both individually and collectively. We'll review 5 styles of consciousness or ways of being. Keep in mind, these ways of being are not rigid boxes or steps each person must move through on their way to awareness. They're just a loose framework, a general model we can use as a guide. Each stage has its gifts or lessons, as well as its limitations, or shadow side. And most of us live in elements of several of these 5 stages at the same time. So I'm going to make a suggestion to you that as we move through these stages, you ask yourself where in your life you may be living each level of consciousness. It's important. Because as I said before, when you recognize the places in your life where you're operating from a less developed state of awareness, you then have the power to choose a different way for yourself. And that is growth. Mankind's journey out of darkness began with this first stage, which we'll call tribal or survival consciousness. For tens of thousands of years, the primary focus of this way of being in the world was belonging. One's life is about making sure there's enough food or protection and shelter, and that as a whole, the group you belong to survives. The world is often seen as dangerous, and outsiders are perceived as threats to the tribe's well-being. And the tribe would often unite when faced with a common threat, be it a natural world danger or another tribe. We can see traces of this stage of our development in our world today, and it's an indication that, as a collective, we've still got work to do. The gifts of this consciousness level are cohesion and protection. In other words, the group learns how to take care of its own. The challenge here, or a shadow side, of this way of being is fear, us versus them thinking, and a tendency to suppress anything that's different from the tribe or the group's dominant worldview. Now, we're seeing a lot of the shadow side of this mode of being in the world at large at this time. And it's an opportunity for us to collectively overcome this way of expression. Hopefully someday we won't need to foster such separation, for we will have conquered our fear of the other by seeing in them the same divinity that resides in each of us. Take a moment now and ask yourself the question, where in my life do I feel I need to compete or find myself striving to belong? Write about it in your journal. The second stage of human consciousness I want to talk about could be called the mythic or religious way of perceiving the world. Here, our focus expands beyond our immediate survival and security needs, and we begin to ask those existential questions, like why are we here? Is there a God? And if so, what does that higher intelligence want from us? At this level of consciousness, our life is structured around sacred stories and rituals, and there's a strong sense of right and wrong. Often, this sense of what's right and what's wrong is handed down to the collective by an external authority. Through sacred writings or scriptures, traditions, a priest, or a prophet. When we hit this stage of awareness and opening, it's a strong indication our awakening has begun. If you've been asking questions like this, and if you are beginning to wonder why you're allowing an external authority to govern your life choices, it's a strong indication you're moving through this layer of consciousness. The gift here is that it gives our existence meaning by connecting us to something larger than ourselves. This can inspire sacrifice, a longing for community, and even devotion in us. The shadow side of this level of being in the world is activated when those mythic stories become rigid and exclusionary, or when fear of punishment replaces authentic love. Remnants of this stage of our collective evolution are evident in our world today as well. You can see them in the religious structures, our political systems, and all our collective pain points we need to address, both individually and as a species. Take a moment to ask yourself, where in my life do I live this pattern of consciousness? Do I wonder where there's more to life than the material world? How do I feel about the state of our world today? Make some notes in your journal about your insights. Eventually, around the 17th century, we saw a distinct shift as humanity's consciousness evolved yet again. We see the move to rational, or what many call modern consciousness. We tested and measured everything, and if it cannot be measured, it was deemed not real. The rights of the individual became the lens through which we viewed the world around us, and at the same time, we collectively became suspicious of the ancient myths and traditions that had once been central to our existence. And if we cannot prove something using the scientific method, we dismiss it as not relevant. The logical mind was in charge, and the human tendency to figure it out, using our limited physical senses, with a need to label and categorize everything, were an integral part of this period. The gift here is tremendous. We saw the emergence of critical thinking, medicine, democracy, and the nascent beginnings of our technological exploration. The challenge or shadow side of this level of being is spiritual amnesia. We forgot about the mystery and reduced everything to mechanical processes in a purely material and limited world. For the most part, we lost our connection to the sacred, the invisible, the luminous unknown. And the result? A feeling of separation. Separation from a part of ourselves, separation from each other. So once more, take a moment here to ask yourself this question: where do I feel separate and limited in my life? Write a few brief notes about this in your journal. The next stage of humanity's consciousness represents our first tentative steps out of slumber. Here we're asking the questions about our place in the greater scheme of things and shifting our focus from material existence to something more expansive. This level of consciousness can best be described as existential or questioning. We've outgrown strict religious frameworks, and at the same time, we're not satisfied with a purely materialistic view either. We've begun to ask ourselves, what do I really believe? What is authentic and aligned for me? Our old certainties often begin to crumble here. The gifts of this level of awareness are honesty and courage, and the willingness to sit in a place of not knowing, and the strength to question our inherited beliefs. The shadow side here is despair, cynicism, or endless deconstruction of ideas and systems without building anything new. Again, take a moment here to ask yourself, where in my life am I beginning to question my beliefs? Where am I not being authentic? Write about it in your journal. Finally, we come to what might be called transpersonal or mystical consciousness. I call this state aligned awareness. Our consciousness begins to express itself as connected to, or even one with, something larger than the individual self. Perhaps we experience it as union with God or as non-dual awareness, which is simply a deep sense of oneness with all life. Our focus tends to shift from what do I want to what is life asking of me, or how can I serve? If these are the questions uppermost in your awareness at this time, acknowledge the work you've done and the progress you've made that's brought you to this place of aligned awareness. It's highly likely, consciously or subconsciously, you've strengthened your connection to your soul or higher wisdom to the point that you're now aware of the signals being beamed to you. The gift of this state of consciousness is a profound sense of peace and belonging. The shadow expression is the tendency for spiritual bypassing, which is where we tend to use lofty ideas and complex theories to avoid our unresolved human pain. Again, take a moment to ask yourself, where in my life am I not paying attention to my inner guidance? Where in my life am I listening to the voice within? Journal about that. Realize that any or all of these stages of consciousness can be active in your life at the same time. Perhaps you recognize your childhood family dynamics in one of these stages of development, what goes on in your workplace in another, and your inner life in yet another. The simple act of self-reflection, of asking yourself the question, where in my life am I living this pattern, can help you identify these patterns of consciousness in your own experience. And if you want to change them, you have the power to do so. That's a brief history relayed in broad strokes of the road we've traveled as a species. Now the questions become, where are we now? And more importantly, maybe where are we headed collectively? There's been a hint in the telling of this story, but if you take a look around the world and examine what's happening, you can see all of these patterns active at the same time, coexisting and often clashing. We can see strong survival and tribal energies in some places and movements. We recognize these patterns in the intense us versus them energy and the pervasive fear that is constantly being stirred up in us by what we witness happening in the world today. In other places, we see strong traditional religious expression where individuals are holding tightly to old, maybe even outmoded belief systems. Interwoven amongst all these patterns is a global interest in mindfulness, mysticism, energy work, plant medicine, and direct connection with, and the first-person experience of infinite consciousness. We are deep in the midst of a global transition of consciousness that is leading us into our next evolution as a collective. And I like to point out here, we spent tens of thousands of years moving through the tribal level, and it took thousands of years to navigate the mythic or religious stage. And the rational or modern consciousness stage took hundreds of years, and then only a couple of centuries for the transpersonal stage. And now we find ourselves at yet another threshold in an even shorter period of time. Notice how each wave of awareness is breaking upon the shore more quickly than the last. I said it before, I'll say it again, we are in the midst of a great transition. Old ways of being, of believing, don't let go easily. There's often a fight to keep the old familiar structures in place, and this can create a backlash that often feels restricting or as if we're being squeezed. We may feel as if nothing is changing for the better, that circumstances are getting worse, but what if this is opportunity knocking? We do have within ourselves the ability to transcend our experiences, and I believe we're being asked to be fully present in this world, holding our light steady without allowing ourselves to be overwhelmed by the chaos around us. Neutrality is a powerful place to live, not allowing the chaos to sway us in one direction or another. You get to choose every day where you will place your energy. That's a powerful choice. And remember this about your awakening. Your questions, your sensitivities, your longing for something more real, these are not just personal quirks. They're part of this larger movement from fear and separation to a more unified, soul-oriented way of being human. So to assist you on your journey, here's an opportunity for some deeper self-reflection. As I invite you into a bit of contemplation on your own life, start by thinking about the environment you grew up in. Was it more about survival and keeping the family or community safe? Was there a strong emphasis on loyalty and not rocking the boat? Or maybe was it very religious with clear rules and beliefs about God, heaven, and hell? Was it more rational and secular? Maybe the message you heard was work hard, get an education, trust science, and don't worry too much about the rest. Take a moment to gently notice which feels most familiar from your early years. And now consider where you find yourself today. Are you in a season of questioning where the old stories, whether religious or purely material, just don't satisfy you anymore? Have you been touching into moments of stillness, love, or connection that feel larger than your personal identity? You don't have to put yourself neatly into a box here. This is more about noticing your trajectory. Here are a few journaling questions you might want to explore after this episode, when you have some quiet time. What story about God, about yourself, or about reality did you inherit from your family or culture? Which parts of that story are falling away or no longer feel true for you? Are there parts you still cherish? And what new story might be emerging in you, even if you don't have words for it yet? You can pause the episode here and jot down a few thoughts, or you can just let those questions percolate in the back of your mind as we move on. Your insights here are important, so I do encourage you to take a few moments at your first opportunity to record them in your journal. As we close, I want to come back to the heart of why I'm sharing this. You are not an isolated person whose life is randomly falling apart. You're a point of consciousness inside a much larger evolution. You're an atom of awareness that is part of the infinite mind, and you are expressing that infinite mind into this dimension. Ask yourself what you want more of, then contribute your energy to that. What do you want less of? Withdraw your light from that, except to send the energy of peace and healing to it. Humanity has been slowly, painfully, and beautifully waking up to who, and more importantly, what we really are. As a collective, we've traveled a path of evolution from early survival instincts to myth and religion, then moved to reason and science to deep existential questioning, and finally, we are on the way to mystical union. Your individual awakening is unique expression of that collective movement. In future episodes, we'll revisit the specific waves of awakening in history, what author and teacher Betty J. Kovach calls waves of remembering, and how Christ consciousness may be one of the most potent expressions of this evolutionary arc. For now, if today's exploration stirred a question in you about where you are on this path, or about the evolution of consciousness in general, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment under this episode on the YouTube channel Evolving Humans with Julia Marie. Your questions will help shape this podcast, and they're likely going to be questions many others are silently asking. Thank you for listening, for thinking deeply, and for being willing to see your life as part of a much bigger story. If you found value in this episode, please share it with 2 other people so that together we can bring more light to this world. If you need guidance, want to reconnect with a loved one living on the other side of life, or could use some energy healing, go to juliamarie.us and click the Book Now button on the homepage. And remember, you carry the light within you that is the doorway through which you begin your journey home.